Greetings. I am Dr. Noni Davis, and let me see, move some of the stuff out the way and get my water. And I'm coming to you from Sya Academy. Uh, is an African-centered private school here in North Carolina, and I'm a legacy owner. I founded this business with my parents, and I now am the primary person in charge. My father, the late William Edward Davis, and my mother, this was really her vision, Sylvia Davis, to have a private school and teach Black kids in the same energy as Marva Collins and Mary McLeod Bethune. And so last week, I started discussing some of the every year we do Africa Day, Diaspora Day, to celebrate the contributions of African Americans during this month, which is also, as I discussed last week, is October is a month of celebrating and honoring the dead. We have the Day of the Dead by Hispanic people, and there you have All Saints Day and All Souls Day with the Catholic Church, and just this season of harvest is something that's related to celebrating those who have left and have transitioned into the other realm. And so last week I discussed it. One of the topics was technology. We talked about Africans who and African Americans and folks from the diaspora with the different inventions. And then I also talked about a few of the revolutionaries, focusing mostly on Angela Davis. But today I wanted to two of the other women that we were talking about for this unit was Elizabeth Freeman and Queen Nanny. And a lot of us are familiar with some of these names, but I just want to show what what my expectation is for my students, but also to just share what I have learned about both of these women. I'm going to start with Mum Bet, who was born in New York in 1744. They think, they're not sure, but she was a child when she was purchased by this man. What's his name? Oh, let's see. I skipped over too much stuff here. Oh, Pieter Heg Hedgeboom, somebody. So, a lot of the people that lived up in those areas, they were from, they were the Dutch. So I think it was called the Dutch New York. But so she was enslaved with her sister Lizzie to this man named Pieter Hedgeboom. And as was the custom, she and her sister, when Mr. Hedgeboom, his daughter got married to this man who was a judge, John Ashley. She and her sister were presented as gifts to this woman. And so, unfortunately, Ashley, Mrs. Ashley, was a horrible person, and they said she was very violent with her enslaved people. And so, on one occasion, she decided to take an iron shovel, something that they used in the kitchen during that time, and it was heated. But they probably used it to move coal around, but it was a heated shovel. And she took this thing and was about to attack Lizzie, Bet's sister. And Bet, of course, came in and blocked it. But when she blocked it, she got a severe burn that went all the way down to the bone. But Bet said, "All right, you burn me, but everybody gonna see it." So they said that one of the things she did in order to show how evil this woman was is to make sure that she never covered that scar, so they would know, yeah, Mrs. Ashley is crazy. She's insane. And so she didn't cover it, and she let everybody see it. And so she was that kind of rebel. She said, "I'm gonna be petty. You mess me up. I'm gonna let everybody know how crazy you are." So now, even though, during this time, this is 1700s, most African Americans were not allowed to read or write. So but it wasn't a reflection of their intelligence. We know that intelligence is not just reading and writing, um, as this Western culture wants to minimize or control people or dictate who they are by how much they can read and write. But it is great if you can do it. Anyway, in this reading and writing culture that we have, Bet was decided she was going to be free, and she was like, under no uncertain terms was she going to continue being enslaved, especially by this crazy person. And so, fortunately for her, she was working in the house of a judge, and this guy, Judge John Ashley, who was also a colonel, was very involved in the Revolutionary War and wanted, this was in the 1773. So they were still in the throes of beginning of these conflicts that had not quite become what we experienced in 1776, but all of the rumblings of it were in effect. So there he was, he wanted to make sure that Massachusetts found a way to, they began to do legislation that will limit England's power over them. And so he would have these meetings in his house. And unfortunately for most white people, they just thought, well, these slaves are dumb, so they ain't here, and they don't understand what we're talking about. And they would be up against the walls, standing silently, not moving like statues, and serving people food and everything. But they were listening to everything that was going on. And they had their own communication line that as soon as they got into the kitchen, they're like, guess what? And so this was one of those situations where they were discussing, what kind of uh, legislation they were going to create to slow down the British. And so they were drafting the Sheffield Declaration, which was approved in January 1773. So, but they were discussing this while and she heard it. So, in what the line that she focused on, her ear, he listened to, and you know held that information, was this statement: mankind in a state of nature are equal, free, and independent of each other, and have a right to the undisturbed enjoyment of their lives, their liberty and property. So I'm going to read it one more time. Mankind in a state of nature. So this is natural. The natural state are equal, free, and independent of each other. That means that nobody can tell you what to do. And have a right to the undisturbed enjoyment. You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to control me. I have a right to enjoy myself, live my life, enjoyment of their lives, their liberty, and their property. If it belongs to me, I get to do what I want with it. So, according to womenshistory.org, this verbiage influenced the U.S. Declaration of Independence of 1776 and the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780. So, Mom Bet said, bet. No, they did not let me hear this statement because they talking about me. If they said everybody, they didn't say white men. They said mankind, everybody. So she was like, let me see what I'm going to do. And so after performing some rituals and prayers, okay, so this is hoodoo month. And I talked about October is hoodoo month. And they did say that she was a nurse and a prominent healer and, a midwife. So if she was doing all that, she already knew about herbs. The girl was not playing. So she went and did her little stuff, her rituals, prayers, and decided to approach an attorney. Now, the attorney she got was this man named Theodore Sedgwick, and Theodore Sedgwick also worked on that document. the Sheffield Declaration. And so he was one of the people who helped to write it and present this before the state of Massachusetts. And so when she asked him for her help, his help, he was like, "Hmm, bet we're gonna do this." And so she joined her case with another enslaved man named Brom. So Mumbet's case went to court in 1781 under a writ of replevin, something like that, with the Berkshire Court in common pleas, and it was filed by Sedgwick. And this ordered Ashley to release Bet and Brom. And of course, Ashley said no. And they're like, okay, well, then we're going to go to court. And so they went to court, and the jury ruled in favor of Mumbet and Brom, stating that the system of slavery was incompatible with the Massachusetts Constitution, and Bet and Brom must be set free. And they were awarded 30 shillings. And this was no money, baby. This was pennies, but they got this many. In today's, I went and researched what would 30 shillings be the equivalent of, and they said $750. I was like, there ain't no money in this day world. But he did have to pay their court fees, and so that became his responsibility. So although what he did intend to do, Ashley, the owner, he said, "Well, I'm gonna go to the Supreme Court," but he ended up, and he's filed a case with the Supreme Court, but he ended up saying, "Oh, never mind," because what happened is that during that time, Massachusetts went ahead and pretty much abolished slavery, and passed a law saying that, like I said up here, that slavery was not compatible with Massachusetts state law, which was what I read earlier about mankind and state of nature are equal, free, and independent of each other, and have a right to undisturbed enjoyment of their lives, their liberty, and their property. So that became the law, and so therefore you can't own anybody. So she was 37 years old when this happened. Now, the judge didn't leave her alone. Judge Ashley, they said he begged her over and over and over again to come back and work for her, and he would pay her. But she was like, oh, oh, no, 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 no. H to the no. And she decided that she would just work, excuse me, as a paid domestic, but for Sedgwick, who was her lawyer who helped her to get free. And, it took her 20 years, but she eventually bought a house. So she was 57 years old when she finally bought herself a house, and lived there with her family. And she spent the rest of her life as a prominent healer. And that's why I said she was practicing hoodoo, and a midwife and nurse. And she died in 1829 at the age of 85, and was buried in the Sedgwick family plot. And I think she's the only person in that who was buried in that grave that was not a member of that family. So, did she lead other people to freedom? Not necessarily in the sense that she was a revolutionary and she went and fought a war and a battle with everybody else, but because she was the first African American woman to successfully go to court and win a case, she set a precedent for folks to be able to go to court, take these folks to court and win their freedom. And so in that regard, she was a revolutionary in the sense that she used the court system, and on that level, she used the court system, and we got all kinds of ways to get free, and that was her way of getting free. So we moved from Miss Elwood, and she renamed herself. She went and she said, "I'm going to be Elizabeth Freeman from now on." So a lot of people whose surnames are Freeman, are from people who they created that surname for themselves, because she, didn't know where she was from. Probably I had no idea, but Anyway, now I'm going to go into Queen Nanny. Moving on from Mama Betty, Miss Queen Elizabeth Freeman, on to Nanny, and now Queen Nanny is from from Jamaica. And like I said, I'm trying to help my children to see these relationships between, and this fire, this desire to be free, that was consistent not only in Africa with Yah Santawa, but now you've got Queen Nanny in in Jamaica, and then you had Elizabeth Freeman. Queen Nanny, it would probably have been Queen Nanny first, then because she was born in 1640 in Ghana, and then you had Elizabeth Freeman, who was born in the 1740, and then a whole century later we have, I think it was 1840 when Yah Santawa was born. I can't remember where did I put that. 1840, yeah. So these were all one whole 100 years apart, pretty much, and I thought that was interesting. So, my students will also share the history of Queen Nanny of the Maroons of Jamaica. Oh, and before I go any further, I want to make sure I show this picture of Queen Miss Freeman, Mrs. Elizabeth Freeman. There she was, and as you can see, what year she was born? 1744 to 18, and she died in 1829. So she was 85 years old. I bought her own house. I said, "Go ahead, Mama." I'm trying to think. Do I have a picture of her house? I couldn't find a picture of her house. But anyway, so now we're going to talk about Queen Nanny. And Queen Nanny was not playing either. So this is Nanny of the Maroons, and she was born in did they say 1685? I thought I saw something else, but 1755, 1685 to 1785. But she was before Elizabeth Freeman. So Queen Nanny, according to the Peoples of the Historic Slave Trade.org, on their website, enslaved.org, Queen Nanny, Nana Queen Nanny was believed to be born an Akan woman of Ghana in 1680s. Okay, they have 1680, and was captured, enslaved, and carried to the Caribbean island of Jamaica in the 1700s. So she was probably about the same age, maybe in her 20s, if she was taken in the early 1700s. Now, Nanny was no joke, and she was a true queen mother warrior, like Yah Santawa, who fought the British in the early 1840 into 1921. So that was Yah Santawa. But Yah Santawa was an elder when she started that fight with them. Now, it is believed that her brother was Kojo, and he's a very famous warrior as well. And they were both enslaved on the island of Jamaica at the same time. Now, she became the leader of the Windward Maroons, and Cujo became the leader of the Leeward Maroons. And Leeward Maroons were the ones who were in the mountains in the western Jamaica, which we would call, Montego Bay. I'm trying to think, do I have it? The Western Caribbean. So that's like Montego Bay, and they were in the mountains also. Now, what was crazy is that, the British, wait, let me go back. Wait. Oh, let's see. Okay, so they both escaped from their enslavers and formed these maroon communities that became safe havens for self-emancipating Africans. And they provided refuge for Africans who were determined to gain their liberty. But the British were outraged because these people weren't just running away and going anywhere. They were actually running away and able to join a community of people who were already up in those mountains. And so they just said, okay, we're gonna have to go to war against these people. And the first Maroon War lasted from 1720 to 1739. And the government of Jamaica, um, uh, according to the government of Jamaica, Jamaica Information Service, she was heralded as an exceptional leader who mastered guerrilla warfare, and eh, let's see, and Cujo and Nanny led the Maroon warriors in military offense such as ambushes and psychological warfare. Now, another site, liberatedsouls.org, states that Nanny also used the mountainous terrain to her advantage. And so apparently, they created these very, very narrow pathways, walking spaces that forced the British Army to walk single file. And the people camouflaged themselves, and they made themselves look like leaves. They probably put mud on themselves so they look like part of the forest. So just like we know the people wear camouflage. Maybe they got it from the Africans, I'm not sure, but I knew that's what they did. So they would dress up. I mean, they were covered themselves with mud. They wrapped themselves in leaves, and they would hide along the path, and they were able to take out one or two or three at a time, and just what do they call it? The maroon soldiers would camouflage themselves with branches and leaves, and they could see the British soldiers, who could only move in single file, like I said, and easily target, ambush, and neutralize the British forces. And what was crazy is that they were a small group of people compared to the British Army had their full military force that they were bringing. But these people, it was like thousands to 100, a few hundred people compared to 1,000 people. And so it took them 15 years. They were just constantly, the British refused to give up. And so for 15 years, they engaged in this warfare. Now, the British attacked the Maroons and finally had to surrender. The British eventually signed a peace treaty, turning 500 acres of land over to the Maroons. But many believe that Queen Nanny's military prowess was not only her natural intelligence, but like other amazing generals like Harriet Tubman, she had a strong connection to her ancestors. And so they weren't just out there. We know that Harriet Tubman would say she would pass out, and she would have these dreams and these visions while she was out, because she was knocked in the head with a 10-20 pound iron ball that an overseer was trying to hit another slave with, and she got in the way, and it hit her in the head, and it caused her to go into these seizures, and she would be out, and then she would wake up. But every time she would wake up, she would have a vision of what she needed to do. And then, like I said, Mom Bet, also was a healer. And so people who have these gifts are also very connected spiritually. And so, a lot of times they don't include that spiritual aspect of their intelligence, or their plan, or their sitting before their altars to get this direction. But, you know, they said Queen Nanny was one of those people. And so, and one of the examples they gave was that she was, that they had lost, um, they were starving. There was a point at which the British had messed them up so badly that now they did their access to food, their ability to grow their crops had was they were focused so much on the war that they could not. It was unsustainable, pretty much, which is what war does. It depletes you. And so she was about to surrender, and she went to sleep, and had a dream that her ancestor said, "Do not surrender." But when she woke up, they said that she had pumpkin seeds in her pocket. And so what she did is that she decided to plant pumpkins. And so this is the legend of Pumpkin Hill. So she started planting pumpkins all around, and they said when they sprouted, they were able to eat these, and this particular pumpkin saved them. And so there's a place called Pumpkin Hill that is where they said, which is one of the hills right around Nanny Town, which is what is called Nanny Town today, that she used to save her people. So legend is that at one point during the war, that's what I said. Okay, I read that. And so it's a food and nourishment strength to continue to fight, which is how the hill, Pumpkin Hill, got its name. And Maroons also use um, different other methods of warfare. So, we know about the drums. They knew when Africans could play these drums and they could send messages. That was the first telephone. They could send a message from one community to the next to encourage people to, either run, uh, fight, or come and fight and join them, or to hide. And then they also use smoke signals to communicate with other communities. And all of it is to communicate with different villages to help or to warn or to coordinate attacks. They also use strategic raids to attack plantations. So they weren't only just um, uh, um, fighting in the hills, but they were also attacking plantations, and they would steal tools. Sometimes they would kidnap. Free, not kidnap, but free other Africans to join their numbers, and they also get food or whatever. But they also would burn entire fields and crops to destroy the economic resources of the plantation owners. And so there are several. What's interesting is that one of the things they said about her, and they believe that these comments were made. I heard it, that she could catch a bullet with her bottom, and then they said fire them out. I mean, they did all kinds of things to try to discredit her, try to say she was more of a witch than she was a military strategist. But in reality, she was a woman who was fighting for her people. And these attempts to demoralize her, she's a woman, she really couldn't do all these things. And we still hear about there are a lot of derogatory commentary about Harriet Tubman too. How could she do it? And apparently Queen Nanny was also one of these little very small short little women who they're like, there's no way she could do this. But the woman was a strategist, and when you're trying to save your people, you're going to do what you have to do, and you're going to have to use all your wits. And like I said, intelligence is not measured in how well you can read and write. Are you a thinking person? Are you critically analyzing a situation and coming up with solutions? And so that's what she had to do. And so Queen Nanny was an amazing a woman with intelligence and knowledge of plants, and understood her environment, just like Harriet Tubman, just like Elizabeth Freeman. And most importantly, she understood the importance of sitting quietly with her ancestors and getting direction for what she needed to do next. So I just want to elevate these women, and Queen Elizabeth. And then last week we were also talking about Angela Davis, who did have an education. She was a PhD. I can relate because I got mine. But we also have to understand that even though they were denying these women access to education, it didn't stop them. And so hopefully these messages are encouraging us to fight, to figure out how we're going to navigate what's coming our way in this crazy time. Anyway, ashe.
If you're talking, they will hear you. We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy, so we show them how. And we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. Not just one time, but every chance we get. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids not only need to know the dangers and how to avoid them, they need to hear it often from you. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids and guide them through the challenges of growing up safe and healthy. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
So tell me, here, you can do it if you try.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I walk into the sound of drums.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I know my mom.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I can play the drums.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I can work with my hands.
I'm a St. Sya student.